Thank you for joining this call today. As Amanda had mentioned, I'm Dennis Jepson, and along with Tina Fuller and the help of Schwinn, we've been leading the CHN representation and work on the Proposition 4. And the purpose of today's call and the one we have scheduled for next Friday is just to have general dialogue around the Proposition 4 and to provide general information, perhaps introduction to resources or other actions for you to consider and your colleagues, peers, etc. So, but prior to getting started on this short brief, I'd like to introduce a special guest, Kim Delfino, who's from the Earth Advocacy and a consultant working with the Yes on Prop 4 campaign. And Kim, would you like to add any additional or tell everyone a bit about you?
Nope, that's good. I am based in Sacramento. So if you're wondering, 100 degrees probably here today. Feeling the effects of climate.
Next slide. So as you may have seen or know, you have observed or maybe even had direct experience with, such as Kim just mentioned, that Northern California is encountering. Fortunately, in Southern California, it's cooled off a little bit. California encountered devastating fires. We have vulnerable water supply issues and extreme summer heat and other major threats that are linked to our changing climate. The Prop 4 measure addresses these issues and takes a proactive prevention approach by making urgent investments and solutions to protect our community's health and, importantly, our economy. So the Prop 4 bond measure addresses threats to not only our iconic landscapes and natural resources, but also coastal health and wildlife before the damage becomes too costly and unmanageable. Next slide. So what you see on this slide is kind of from the 10,000-foot level. There are really 8 buckets of categories that the $10 billion bond funds will be allocated to. And those include drought, flood, and water supply issues, forest health, and importantly, wildfire prevention, which secondarily will improve our air quality, sea level rise and coastal health, land conservation and habitat restoration, energy infrastructure, which would include offshore wind and other non-carbon fuel alternatives, battery storage, etc., parks and recreation, urban greening, addressing extreme heat, particularly with cooling centers and really focusing on disadvantaged or low-income communities across the state that may be at higher risk and more vulnerable to extreme heat. And then improving our farm and agricultural resources, particularly as it pertains to water supply and conservation. Next slide. But we wanted to pull out some specific examples of how funds may be allocated for public health and safety, and that's where all of our interest is, right? So we just a few of those, 1.25 billion will go to the California Natural Resources Agency for those local fire prevention capabilities, really expanding that to decrease wildfire issues. 150 million for the urban greening, not only to address and mitigate the extreme heat issues, but also there's plenty of evidence in the literature to show that urban greening also has a positive influence on mental health and well-being. 200 million for that extreme heat protection and resilience, as I had previously mentioned. the 170 million for our Salton Sea area and the people that live around that area. And this has actually been in the media for the past couple of weeks because this is a hot area with poor air quality, which leads to a lot of respiratory issues and documented high asthma rates. 380 million for water reuse and recycling, which surprisingly, the more that I read about Prop 4, there's nearly 1 million people across the state who currently don't have access to good water resources. And the additional 75 million for the clean water projects to improve that access. And overall, this Proposition 4 has a directive and some accountability measures that have been implemented along with it. And nearly half or 40% of the funds earmarked must go to vulnerable communities or disadvantaged communities. So really addressing that climate and environmental justice aspect of it. Next slide. So what's been done, just to give you a high level overview of what the Yes on 4 campaign has been addressing. So in September, the major address is one, getting the word out, getting more organization endorsements, and also addressing op-eds and letters to the editor, which, by the way, CHN, particularly Henna, has been a LTE a warrior on this, and we'll give you those examples a little later in this presentation. But Henna and I have been focused on learning as much about the Prop 4 and tying it to specifically to those health impacts for our communities. And we'll have been present at the weekly statewide Yes on 4 campaign calls to remain up to date on what's being done. And in addition to educating ourselves, we prepared some health talking points document resource that we'll be sharing along with an endorsement letter within the for our CHM members. Now for October, the Yes on 4 campaign will be really managing and facilitating some statewide multiple site media campaigns. And along with these media campaigns, they're requesting help not only as for speakers, but also perhaps to join a rally, holding signs, etc. So a wide variety, and that's where our healthcare voice or representation, I think, would be very important. So that is one way. And then throughout November, up through the ballot measures, will certainly be really pushing, coming down to the finish wire to really advocate for getting information out there. And specifically around those talking points, because I'm sure as you go to your working sites or other organizations or talk to your peers and neighbors, etc., it really will be an issue that we can bring up and really be educated about what are the key measures, the pros and the cons of Proposition 4. I'm sure you've all received your 150-page resource guide on the voter issues. And within that, on pages 24 and through 29, is it addresses Prop 4, the pros and the cons, and etc. But prior to that, we wanted to get this information out to you to have better health talking points, etc. Next slide. Now, as previously mentioned, certainly Climate Health Now is one of the many organizations that are endorsing the passage of Proposition 4. And if on the website that I'm going to show you on the next slide, you can certainly go there. There is many, many, many more individuals, organizations, businesses, advocacy groups, etc., that have endorsed Prop 4. Next slide. And speaking of that, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jot down this link to the Yes on Prop 4 website. There's also a QR code that can take you directly there, but it provides a wealth of information in regards to the information that I just shared. A lot of key that can be printed out and distributed to peers, colleagues, organizations, etc. It's an opportunity where you can link on and make an endorsement, and well as signing up for the weekly newsletter distribution. And Kim, is there anything that I missed or you wanted to highlight or share with us about the campaign?
Sure. I thought you might have some more slides where you went into greater detail.
We're gonna do the actions next. I think this is an opportunity.
Yeah, maybe do that. And then if people like at the end, if there's questions, so far, I mean, it's a comprehensive presentation you put together. So, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll hand it over to Schwinn.
Yeah, for sure. So, hi everyone. I think I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of space first to see if you had any questions or have heard anything about Prop 4. I know we had a question coming in through email. I don't know if Marge is here, but what was it? Was there any questions? Oh, I see Alana, your hand is up.
Yeah. I was just waiting for the big bad news about what Giant Industry is the opponent that doesn't want this to go through.
The Taxpayers Association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association is opposing, as is Senator Brian Jones, who's a Republican. There's really not actually very much opposition to it. That's basically it. There's huge amounts of support. There is very little opposition. It's the usual taxpayer association issues about not wanting to, they just don't support bonds in general.
Got it. Okay, well, that's great news. I feel like usually there's like the Goliath that's getting in the way.
Nope.
Could
Thank
you
you.
explain how it's going to be funded and like what, you know, how it would affect an individual like person in California?
Sure, I can answer that.
Yeah.
So California has a long history of passing bonds to fund infrastructure. Basically, the state would sell bonds on the bond market over a period of time, and it generally is geared to what the state is able to repay on an annual basis through utilizing the general fund. The general fund is your general tax dollars go into a big general fund, and that is the pot in which we pay to many different things. We've restricted the pot in many ways. We've passed ballot initiatives like Prop 98, where you have to spend a certain amount on schools and other things, but the remainder is the funding that goes to fund most other things, and including repayment of bond issuances. The bond issuance repayment period is over 40 years. It would have in many ways, a very little impact on or none really on the average person because of how widely distributed. And the Legislative Analyst's Office did an analysis on what would be sort of the fiscal implications of passing Prop 4. And what they basically said is that it's actually a cost savings measure in the long run, because the infrastructure projects that are getting funded on the front end are preventative projects. And so we're paying more. It's like in the healthcare world, it's preventative medicine versus paying on the back end when you're actually getting sick, which could end up being far more costly in dealing with something once a disease is, happened. So it's kind of the same principle here. We do say the forest treatments. So then we don't have the extreme fire. So then we don't have to deal with the aftermath of dealing with extreme fire. Same with sea level rise and water quality projects. So that's the fiscal implications of Prop 4. But it does take, it would require some money to be paid out of the general fund. It's not like a free lunch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the money will come from the state, not from individual.
No, it's the
taxpayers.
state general fund. Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. And then Wendy, you had a question? You want to ask it? Or I can read it for you.
Sure. I'm sorry about my technology challenges. I was just curious about why this is going through the proposition process rather than being like individual bills. That's it.
So in order to issue bonds, the state, we have to go through the ballot process. And so we need, the legislature actually passed Proposition 4. It was at Senate Bill 867. And it had been discussed and debated in various iterations for over 4 years within the legislature. The legislature then placed it on the ballot for the voters to approve the $10 billion bond issuance.
Got it. Yeah, I think that the only place I've heard about this is through Climate Health Now.
Yeah, well, the bond didn't get approved by the legislature until the end of June, which is actually quite late. Normally, campaigns like this, normal bond campaigns, have had many months to gear up. We've been sort of operating behind, flying the plane while we build it, kind of is the analysis or the analogy I would give. And so we're trying very hard to get the word out as fast as possible.
I heard about it when I met with my state legislators, Damon Connolly and Mike McGuire, and they were saying this is like the most important thing we can do is support Prop 4.
And then there's a question in the chat about taking out a $10 billion loan. In a sense, yes, but it's not all at once. So the bond issuances are over a long period of time. It's not like the state's going to they can't sell $10 billion worth of bonds all at once. It's sort of over an extended period of time. And a lot of it is geared off of how much the Department of Finance thinks that the state is able to take on as repayment. Oh, it's not a question, it's an explanation. Okay, sorry.
Amanda?
Yeah, I have a question that was asked, not from me, but I have the same question, but I was also just going to share, Wendy, if it's helpful, because I also am learning all of this. And Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is any bond that gets onto our ballots has already gone through the legislative process. Is that right? Like the school bonds were originally bills that have passed both houses. Newsom's, is that?
Well, so no, so there's two ways to qualify bonds for the ballot. The legislature can pass it, or it can be a citizen generated.
Oh,
So you could go out through the process and gather signatures for a bond. So like there have been other bonds that have been put on through the signature process,
I see.
but
Okay.
usually we try to go through the legislature.
Okay, so Newsom then presumably support, I don't know the extent to which he's able to endorse specific bonds, but presumably he supports this because it's made it onto the ballot. Is that right?
He has taken no position on the two. He has not. He's not taken a position on this one way or the other. I think there's some speculation that because of how poorly the past initiative that did in the March, that he's just not putting, I don't know, with the governor.
And then the question that we're curious to know the answer to is there anything in the Prop 4 language around hydrogen specifically?
So there's $50 million in the forest provision that is for the Forest Biomass to Carbon Negative Fuels program. So this was a program that was funded a few years ago when we had a large amount of general fund, and $50 million was put towards the program. The Department of Conservation issued planning grants, about $4 million worth of planning grants. 3 million to various NGOs, and then about $1 million to tribes. And then the idea was that the remainder of the funding was going to go towards then standing up whatever the planning grants were going to produce as projects. But then when the general fund declined, the funding was withdrawn. And so all we had was the planning grants that were out there. And so it is, if you go on the Department of Conservation's website and you look up forest biomass to carbon negative biofuels pilot program, that is basically the program they're planning on putting the $50 million towards. And you can see the planning grants that were given out. And some of it is to small scale hydrogen, but it's not, it's non-combustible. So it's essentially, they're trying to find projects to deal with the large amount of fuel that's being, the forest woody biomass that's being generated, both in terms of cleaning up after the big fires we've had, but also then doing fuel reduction projects as well. And it's kind of like we have all this wood waste and we're trying to figure out what to do with it.
So that's the only place in which there is some hydrogen. Okay, gotcha.
Correct. That's the only, and it's 50 million. And frankly, I mean, when you look at hydrogen projects like that, that's not going to fund a big hydrogen project. It's just not enough money.
Okay, gotcha. So that 850 million for clean energy infrastructure, that's not touching is there like
No, that's directed mostly, almost the vast majority of that is being directed towards the offshore wind infrastructure. So doing port improvements and other necessary infrastructure improvements in order to facilitate offshore wind. And then there's 50 million, and I'm having a senior moment, I think, towards long duration storage program that's at the Energy Commission.
Okay.
I have a
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question and then I'll have to go because I have a patient at 1. Number 1, is there anything related to PFAS, you know, the forever chemicals in water and the clean water stuff? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, there is money in, there's $610 million going to the Water Board for grants and loans to improve safe, clean, and reliable drinking water, including PFAS monitoring and remediation.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand electronically if I'm screen sharing. Did somebody have their hand up?
No, it was just you.
Kim, I'm assuming the answer to this is no, but there's nothing in Prop 4 about carbon capture, like CCS, carbon capture and sequestration? No. Okay.
Not to my knowledge. No, no. They tried, honestly, they tried really hard to draft a bond measure that would not have any kind of red flag kind of projects in it that would cause opposition from environmental groups, environmental justice organizations. I think they were really sensitive to avoiding that.
Is there anything with nuclear?
There's no nuclear in there.
Okay. Is there anything related, sorry, is there anything related to the, you know, the climate resilient schools bill that didn't pass, like training the workforce of the future or like making
There is some
safer?
workforce training in there, particularly in the fire section, because there does need to be a fair amount of workforce development. I think I'm forgetting something else, but there is some funding in there for workforce development. Trying to remember now. Pretty sure it's in the wildfire section. Yeah.
Is there anything around promoting use of native plants in landscaping?
that's a good question. I don't know if the bond has it specifically. I think if funding's going into some of the existing programs, there's been an effort to try to add language into some of these programs for native plant preference. But like urban greening and urban trees, yeah, I don't know specifically. And you'd think I should, because I also work with the California Native Plant Society, but the California Native Plant Society does support this.
Okay, good to know. All right, any other questions before we get into the actions on how we can support Prop 4? Because as Wendy, or I think somebody had said it, is that we didn't hear about Prop 4 until like very recently, and I already have my ballot. So, oh, Amanda, did you have another question?
Sorry. Realizing I have questions. Maybe, I don't know if you guys are going to get into this in a little bit, and if so, feel free to skip this, but if not, can you speak a little bit, Kim, to the polling data, unless that's going to come later, but I assume there's been some polling of Californians.
Yeah, there's been different polls. The most recent was the Public Policy Institute, or PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California polling. They did just a straight ballot reading where they read the ballot label to voters. And I believe that polled in around the 61, 62, I'm trying to remember, in the 60s percentile. And I think previous polling was in the mid 50s. So yeah, I mean, because a lot of people haven't heard about Prop 4, it's been a little challenging. And I think, we're optimistic, but honestly, the economy is weighing very heavily on people's minds. And so I definitely don't think this is a slam dunk. I think that, we're trying, we're not taking anything for granted. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it has a good name, but we don't know whether or not it's gonna be what was it, convincing enough once people are actually submitting their ballots. These are great questions, you guys. So are there any other questions that you guys have? No? Okay, all right. Well then, I mean, Kim, you're gonna be able to stay on, right? So if there are other questions, okay, perfect. All right. So so let's move forward. So yeah, so this QR code goes to the Yes on Prop 4 CA website, which is actually a really, really great resource. Right now, now that you guys have heard about it, we thought it would be a really good chance to, I see Amanda on your phone. It's just funny when people do it on camera. All right, so then, what was it? Yeah, so we, because, we pulled together this info session like very last minute. And so, so thank you everyone for being able to join us on a pretty short notice. I know many of your names and have spoken to a lot of you. And so I know you guys are very activated CHN members, so thank you. But I think really the hope is that, we're starting so you guys are our foundation, right? And so then let's actually get the word out about Prop 4 and have people know about it. And I think, yes, the title is nice, but we know there's a lot of influences outside of our control. But if we talk about it from a health perspective, I think it really does make a big impact. So Amanda, can you go to the next slide? Okay. So the first thing that we can do, that everybody can do, and it's very, very easy, is go onto social media. And I think there was, Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember something about how the people who are the most undecided, not the hardcore yeses, not the hardcore nos, but somewhere in the middle where they're like, oh, maybe, they're not totally opposed to it, but maybe not, right? Depending on how they're feeling that day. A lot of that age group, I think, is in the age group that uses social media. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is why one of the first thing that we're going to go through is just hey, I mean, I don't have a ton of social media presence. I don't know, but I think that it is still good, right? Every vote counts. And so then they have, they have X, or formerly known as Twitter. I still am not getting over that. And Facebook and Instagram. I only use Instagram. I don't remember my Facebook password. So you can start following what's it called? The Yes on 4 Instagram account, which is really good. They actually have been posting up some really nice things that are really easily forwarded. Like, so like you can repost it onto your account, both like posts as well as what's all those stories, the little video things. There have been really good ones. And so yeah, so I would hopefully everybody actually, you know what? Can you skip forward really quick, Amanda, to the next one? Yeah. So these are all of the handles. I may look young, but I don't really know how to properly talk about social media. So yeah, so this is how you can find them on your platform of choice. And then also, you know, if you could like and share as many of their posts. I have noticed that it's getting better. When I first joined a couple weeks ago, it was like, oh, there is nobody on this thing. But now it's been getting better. And so I think that's good. So like and share those posts, and you know, I think they're very well done. So and other organizations have been coming up with some really novel like little videos and I don't know, stories and stuff. So it's been really good. And then
Question.
also,
Oh, I see Wendy's hand. Oh, there you go.
yeah. Thanks.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I don't know actually. Kim, are you on LinkedIn?
I'll be honest, I'm terrible when it comes to all of that. I don't believe they are on LinkedIn, although organizations may be sharing the information on their individual organizations' LinkedIn pages, but the campaign itself does not have a LinkedIn page or whatever it is for LinkedIn.
Maybe they should do one.
I will suggest that to them.
Yeah, I mean, that would actually be a really interesting one. If you guys have a template, I know a lot of our members are on LinkedIn and they could post it up, right? And just to kind of talk about, you know, why they're voting for Prop 4. It's yeah, that's actually true. Because you know, why not have more social media platforms? But I think that is actually LinkedIn comes up a lot for. So yeah, that's a good idea, Wendy. And what was it? Oh, I was going to mention that the Yes on Prop 4 CA website that we had the QR code for also has like a really nice toolkit, so that people can, you know, there's like templates for all of the posts and stuff like that. I'm gonna leave some time at the end for us to kind of brainstorm what else we could do, but I thought it would be really cool if, you know, if the people start making some Prop 4 videos from a health perspective. I know during our picnic 2 weeks ago, we had a couple of postcards where people are writing to their friends and family and colleagues on why they were voting for Prop 4, because we're old school and we use mail. But I think that a video would be really helpful to the Prop 4 peoples. And yeah, and they say like, yeah, the producing your own content is really helpful, especially like in your place. And so, you know, I've noticed a couple of the videos that have been put up by other organizations or other individuals have been out in nature. I haven't seen anything from like, you know, a doctor's office or anything like that. So it'd be kind of interesting to get that, you know, some kind of video along that vein. All right. So then the next one. So has everybody, I want to see one second. Who has actually gone in and like followed one of these social media thingies? You can use your virtual hand. Okay, good job. Oh, yay. I have to. Video for homework. I mean, yeah. All right. Well, hopefully all of you are able to do that. And then the next thing is an op-ed or a LT. And so I know many of you have had experience and have gone to our other sessions or action hours where we talk about writing an op-ed or writing an LTE or a letter to the editor. So the Yes on 4, campaign, and Kim and all of them have made these really nice kind of like, hey, this is kind of what is an op-ed and how do I make it stand out? But we'll just kind of, the op-ed is the longer one. The letter to the editor is a shorter one. And so Amanda, can you skip forward to that one? Yeah, so the letter to, and so Hina, who is not here, she's on vacation right now, but she'll be here next week for our second info session. But she has been like an LTE queen. She is just going in and just writing all sorts of ones. So I'm gonna show you guys examples of what she's written, but they're short. I mean, she just like, she got like energy in the middle of the night and she just wrote them off. But we have this, it's a good template to follow. So we will go, yep, exactly. So whether or not you're writing an op-ed or an LTE, one, we're happy to help and support you. And I think that we can also ask Kim and her team for any help. But overall, it's best comes from like a very, very regular point of view, right? And so I like these tips, like be concise, right? Conversationally, localize it to your area, to your geography, leverage your health community perspective, and then where is it? Find a fresh set of eyes. So I thought those were really, really good tips. And then the next slide. So I would say like right now, it would be good to just check your local newspaper, see whether or not there has been, an op-ed or an LTE, and look at the guidelines and see whether or not, this is something that if you want to do, it would be really, really impactful. And so now as the ballots are, coming in and people are talking a bit more about what's on the ballots, I think this is a really good time. I've been noticing a lot of op-eds and LTEs. Just I'm in LA, so I see it as always on the LA Times. They're all talking about the things that are on the ballot. So I think that now is a really, really good time. And again, if you guys are interested, just let us know so that we can help you guys. And then the next slide is Hina's 200-word LTE to the SF Chronicle. I really wanted to pull out that, that second paragraph, right? I thought that was a really impactful one, which is like, and I think we all agree on this one. It's like in medicine, we strive for, prevention is better than a cure, right? And so actually, there's this really cool thing. We're going to send it out in our endorsement email next week. But, there's FEMA, right, says that, if you mitigate, right, natural hazard mitigation saves $6 for every $1 spent, right? I think this is exactly the same theme that we always try to, like that we always talk about in medicine and healthcare. And so, this is the same thing with our earth, right? Is that if we are able to actually be a little bit more, risk, what's it called? Preemptive on our care plan, right? On our treatment plan, then just responding when things are too late. This is the same thing. So I think that all of us are very comfortable talking about that, and that comes through really well in Hina's LTE. And so, so she talks about the wildfire smoke contributing to 52,000 premature deaths, an economic impact of 430 billion, making the 10 billion look like, peas in comparison, right? And then the unsafe drinking water. So yes, kudos to Hina. She lives up in NorCal, so we need a little bit more SoCal and other Inland Empire like representation. But yeah, it's very simple though, right? Like it's a good one. Kim, I don't know if you had any comments about doing these.
All I would say is that, and I think you kind of know you're the example, you'd be surprised at how many people read letters to the editor. A lot, they actually do get read by quite a few people and they make a big impact. And I think that having healthcare professionals talk about the importance of what Proposition 4 would mean based from their perspective is a very compelling. You guys are trusted messengers, and I think it would be incredibly helpful to have that.
Yeah. And I will send you guys the link to this one, the one that was what was it, in the SF Chronicle. The next one is the one that she published in the Mercury News. Like I said, she's been an LTE queen right now. Yeah, yes. And so then this one, similar. This one was, they had it on the guidelines, like every newspaper has the guidelines of how many words, what's their kind of process and all that. I found it to be pretty straightforward. So if you look at your local newspaper website, it's pretty easy to find. And then you can see how many words, but this one's a little bit shorter. So it's a little bit more concise, but there's the nice line of, there is no medication I can prescribe to my patients that would stop wildfires threatening their homes or air pollution worsening their kids' asthma. And no amount of therapy to my dismayed patient will run their water supply free of contaminants. I was like, oh, punchy. That was good. So anyway, so it's like, these little things, they do matter. I would start scanning your newspaper to see whether or not people are writing opinion pieces about Prop 4 and then getting a response. That's actually how Hina decided to write this one, is because there was, I think Mercury, one of these, I forget which one, had an article, somebody, do you remember, Kim?
The Mercury News, there's been articles, but then the Mercury News, the Bay Area News Group that owns the Mercury News, editorialized against Prop 4. So then people have been writing op-eds and letters to the editor in response. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, Amanda?
I have a question just in terms of the timing. For if we were going to try to get an op-ed placed, what do you think, Kim, is the right, I mean, is it basically anytime now to the election because people are getting their ballots, or do you think waiting
Sooner rather than later, because it takes about at least a week for the editorial page writers to review and decide what they're putting in there. But yeah, so I would say anytime between now and the end of October, but sooner rather than later, since ballots are dropping next week. Yeah,
And-
the ballots are dropping on Monday.
Okay.
Is anyone, I'm just gonna pause right here. Is anyone interested in working on a op-ed or an LTE? It's okay if you're not, just wondering. Wendy, I see your little thumbs up. Oh, Ilana, yay. Okay, awesome. We can contact you guys afterwards and we can talk through it, see what kind of support you need. Thank you. Yay. Oh, and Amanda, awesome. Okay, so we'll work on that one. Now I'm gonna go through a couple of the messaging that has worked. So I think we have a pretty good one. Yeah. So next slide, Amanda. Next one. Okay. So the Yes on 4 campaign is very organized. And y'all are, they've been doing polling on what kind of messaging really works well. And so then there's a couple of different angles that I thought were helpful when talking about Prop 4. It's what I used at the picnic when I was talking to people who, because we did a little bit of a mini info session, just one-on-one with people talking about Prop 4. But, the table setting message is really around, hey, it's we're shifting from disaster response to disaster prevention before all our costs become costly and unmanageable. I can't speak today, you guys. But I think that one we've talked about a lot, and that's kind of the messaging that Hina went with on her LTEs. A couple of other ones though, so that's a good one, and I think that's the most impactful. But if you want to talk about specifically to say, for example, the next slide. Thank you. What was it? Water. I don't know. If you're like having conversation around the water cooler, I've never been able to pull this off like smoothly at all. But there is a lot of money in here for water infrastructure, and it's like one of those things that we take for granted until it's really, until there's a bunch of lead in it. So that's kind of one of those things where, talking about water and upgrading our water infrastructure is also, a really impactful one. And so, it allows us to clean up our water, ensure all Californians access to clean, safe drinking water. I don't think this one is controversial at all because it's water. And so that's why I think this one also kind of fares well when people are messaging this way. And then the last one is wildfire prevention. And wildfire prevention, I find to be one of those things where it gets talked about while there's a lot of wildfires in your area, and then everybody drops off and forgets that wildfires are a thing. But with this recent heat wave, who knows? So it's one of those things where if wildfires are kind of the topic of conversation, then, that also is a lot of the money for this bond is also going to wildfire prevention. And I think also like both Republicans, Democrats, like people across the aisle, I think everyone knows that we need to have a much more common sense approach to wildfire prevention. That is, like we like controlled fires and things like that. Like I think that that's a pretty easy message. And so because Prop 4 does invest a lot in preventing wildfires and reducing their intensity, because you've already done a lot of the brush clearing and all that, it makes it so that we don't spend so much money on those wildfires. I think there's some really good something about like if we had spent $10,000 on like wildfire prevention for the what was that really big one, the which fire?
Paradise?
Huh?
Paradise?
No, not Paradise, the other
The
one.
Dixie Fire.
Yeah, exactly. So then that one I think cost like, I don't know, like however many millions of dollars to actually control. But if we just spent $10,000 a little bit earlier, then it would have been okay. So I mean, that kind of happens over and over again. It's one of those things where, we just gotta invest in the early prevention. And Amanda is asking, is there specifically funding for prescribed burns?
Yes, there is definitely money in here for prescribed and managed fire. 100%, yes.
Yeah, I noticed that was a big one. I think that's why you guys have all the firefighters, right? Like all the firefighter associations are sponsoring or endorsing it, right?
Well, not just because of the prescribed fire, but there's also the forest treatment. There's infrastructure. It's 1.5 billion for wildfire. And for them, prevention is huge because then they're not having to fight these crazy mega fires that we've been getting. And let me just say, just from I do work on fire issues, and I did go up to the Dixie Fire, and I would just say that I saw the difference. So I saw land. So the Dixie Fire was a huge fire, so it's going to be devastating regardless. But I saw lands that had been treated beforehand with fire treatment, and while it was burned, the trees were still alive. And then literally next door to it was a plot of land that had not been treated, and it was just charcoal that was left. So it has a significant impact on the ability of forests to be resilient to fire, because we're not going to stop fire from happening in California, but it is about lessening the intensity of the fires themselves and the significance of the impacts on the back end after the fire burns.
It would be great to see like a picture with the comparison of the two areas.
For sure. Alana, I see your hand up.
I had a couple of questions when just wondering, I know that a lot of regional organizations have done a lot around fire, for example, and are already have so much in progress that they've developed over the years. And I guess kind of the overarching question, which maybe is too big to answer, but like, who organizes all of this stuff? Is it money going out to smaller organizations on the ground and in the community, or is California doing this giant, like, we're going to do water and we're going to do fire, and we're going to do all the things?
No, so there, it kind of depends, so it depends. But if you go into the money that was flagged that we talked about earlier about the money going to the California Natural Resources Agency, a lot of that money gets funneled out into, that, for example, there's these things called regional forest and fire collaboratives that have been stood up around, that are locally driven regional collaboratives. Funding 185 million is going to be going out to them. Then there are grants that would be going to fire safe councils. So a lot of the money may get funneled through CAL FIRE mostly, but that money then goes out through their programs and their grants into these other more regional and local efforts. And that's when the dollars are spent on the ground. So, and the same would be for like the water. So the 610 million that would go to the State Water Board, they then grant that money out to local governments and local water districts to then use those funds to build the projects that they need locally. So it's kind of like, you know, the delivery systems vary, but they're all going out into local collaboratives.
And then do you know if plans are already in place, or is it like, okay, we're going to give you a bunch of money, start thinking about, I mean, obviously there are certain places that are inundated by fire and they can't wait around to make a plan. But like, if these programs are already going on and are just waiting for more money to be able to accomplish
On the
more.
fire side, it's very much where there has been a lot of planning already happening. There's still planning that's going on. They have not planned everything for everything all over the state, but there's a significant amount of planning that's already gone forward. And this is just continuing to fulfill money. There was money that has been going forward through what they call the cap and trade funds. So they've stood up a lot of this, and this bond would keep the money flowing essentially, so that all the work that has been done doesn't just fall off a cliff because we don't have additional funds to keep it going.
Great, thank you.
Interesting. Okay, so then, what was it? So a couple last things. So I have written down Alana, Wendy, Amanda. You guys are gonna be, what was it? We can work together on LTE or op-ed writing. And then one other thing, right? We have an info session again next Friday, same time, lunch and learn. Hey. So what was it? I ask that everybody here forward it along to, you know, a friend, colleague, somebody, right? So that they can also learn and, you know, be a little bit more educated, be able to ask questions about Prop 4. I think, you know, we're all very, and we try to be educated voters, right? And this is just a really nice way to be able to, you know, answer questions and stuff. And then, oh, okay. And then also, does anybody want to be a little bit more involved? So right now it is Dennis and Hina who are co-leads for the Prop 4 campaign team. It's obviously a very short stint because our election voting is in November. But I think, you know, Dennis and Hina would love to have any help and any kind of, you know, brainstorming. We just meet about once a week, just to see what we can do. And yes, it's a very defined 1 month commitment. But also, you know, we can also start sending out emails to a core group of CHN members who are interested in doing more. So is anybody interested in that? You want to just write it into your, yes. Yes, exactly. And so, yeah, so let us know via the chat or write your name in, or put your hand up, whichever one works for you. And then to Kim's point, they are doing press events all over the state. And so, what was it? We will find out through the campaign meetings, and we all get the emails and stuff too. But if anybody is interested in being a speaker, I think that that's also something that you guys have asked for, right? Is like having some people speak, just like short things, but that's something that we can coordinate, especially if you are on the that CHN team, that we can kind of disseminate that information. Oh, there is events everywhere. Very cool. All right. Yeah, Kim, we can coordinate with you and see what those dates are for each of those and see if we can have people turn out as well.
That would be
Um,
great.
What's the kind of like expectation if our members do turn out there?
We're just asking for folks, at this point, just having folks turn out to hold signs, be available. And we are locking down the dates. It'll be the third and fourth weeks of October. And like I said, we're locking down the dates and the locations, and we can get that information to you.
Perfect. Yes.
And they're usually in the morning, like 10:30. I know it's not convenient. It's during the weekday in the morning. And I'm like, oh, it's hard for regular people to show up who have full-time jobs.
Kim, can I ask one? Sorry, Chun, can I ask one other question? I'm inspired. I need to look at some of the videos on Instagram that the campaign is posting. But would we, in the past, we've done, because they're can be relatively easy to put together virtually, like recorded videos of health people speaking in support, for example, of Prop 4. Is that something that you guys would want? And would you help us? Like, we're not video editors by any means. Is there like, is that something you guys could help us with, or should we just do our best and get you what we can get you?
Let me talk to Jonathan, who's sort of the lead. Let me talk to Pascal Roth, which is the communications folks. I'm not a comms person. I probably couldn't do a video either. But let me talk to the Pascal Roth folks and get back to you about what they can and can't do.
Okay, because I think that's something else we could probably offer if you think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. All right. And then the other thing is that if your organization wants to endorse Prop 4, right? We have, CHN has endorsed it. I think you guys are always looking for more, just to make it look like, whoa, everyone's seriously endorsing this thing. And so we can share that information. And then also the health talking points. We'll send it out. We'll send out an email after this, just giving you all the resources. But I know we are at time. So I really appreciate everyone for coming out today. Thank you, Kim, for joining us. And we will be in contact. Yay.
Thank
All
you.
Thank you, Kim and Dennis and Schwinn.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.